G'day, Ed. How are you, mate?
Can't complain, Rob. I tried, but nobody listens.
I was looking for a news intro for the podcast and the videos here, and I came across a category in a streaming service that I use called Lickd, Lickd, and actually a really cool service. It lets you use mainstream music. So if you wanted to use like a top 20 hit, so what you do is you pay $15 a month for it, and then you pay $8 per track, and you can use it just on one video. But they got like 100,000 other tracks in there as well that you can use for free. You can use them as many times as you want. And
Good to know.
I just got to acknowledge them. But I got some great quality music and some great things. So I spent a couple of hours over the weekend doing that. What about you, man? What did you get up to on the weekend?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been a pretty busy weekend. You know, there were a lot of news events, a couple that I wanted to talk about. And I said, well, I better bone up on them to make, so that I can talk to them from, the position of authority. So, yeah, a lot of homework this weekend. And uploading some fun videos to another channel that I have. So it's pretty productive. I got to tell you
that other channel, if people want to tune into that, because there's some classic old movies over there. It's really cool. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah. So that channel is called Ripples in Time. And it's a way for me to scratch my itch when it comes to old movies. I like old movies, and I got a lot of really good ones on there. I'm kind of surprised what I can get away with some of the movies that are going on. So any of you out there who are old movie buffs, why don't you go over to Ripples in Time. Maybe Rob can put the link to the channel in the description below and check it out. I've done absolutely no promotion in that channel whatsoever, and I wasn't expecting to do this one, but it's growing on its own. People are finding it on its own. So a lot of old movies on there, and some of them that are not so old, but I happen to like them. So
Ripples tell me about the old movies. What are your favorites? You love the old war movies. You love the old acting. What do you love about those old black and white movies?
My tastes are pretty eclectic. So yeah, I like the classic war movies. I got a special affinity for the old World War II movies. Like 12 O'Clock High and Run Silent, Run Deep. I really like the old submarine movies and the old. I like them all. I like the old World War II movies. I'm a World War II buff. For some reason I just like it. I grew up when I grew up in our neighborhood, we grew up playing war. You can't go do that nowadays, of course. But we grew up, playing war, and that was and a lot of the old classic musicals and old movies like Charade and Spellbound, North by Northwest. I can go on and on. A lot of the old anything with John Wayne in it. I'm a fan of. So yeah, so pretty eclectic. I got some Boris Karloff movies. I got some of those quirky old sci-fi horror movies that are really stupid, but they're so stupid you got to watch them, right? They're so bad that they're good. Right? They're like The Brain That Wouldn't Die. Just pure fantasy, pure fun. So when I was a kid, my mom would drop us off at there was a local theater called the Uptown, and they would play these old movies, these old sci-fi movies, right? And you go in, and they all have double features, and you go in like The Brain That Wouldn't Die, and the Atomic Spider and stuff. Really stupid movie, but when you're a kid, you really get into it, you get involved. And so I got a bunch of those on there too. So just play around, scroll through. There are a lot of movies on there now. So everyone scroll through. There's something for everyone. Sherlock Holmes, the real Sherlock Holmes. The Basil Rathbone. So anyway,
I love hearing it. I love hearing your perspective. That society and culture thing that we have. Like Aussies often think that Americans are exactly like us, but you guys are actually nothing like us. You sound the same, you look the same, you speak the same, but the cultural differentiation is like really huge. But there's some things in our cultures, American and Aussie culture, that are almost exactly the same. And I think that's because Australian culture is so heavily influenced by American media. And back in the day, there wasn't Australian television shows or Australian movie studios. There was, but it just wasn't at any sort of scale. And even if it did have a little bit of scale, they didn't have the ability for distribution the way that it was as well. So all of those things that you were talking about there are part of my childhood as well, albeit in a slightly different way, not so much as the theatre side of things, but on a Saturday afternoon as a young kid growing up, I was watching, World War II movies, Run Silent, Run Deep, 12 O'Clock High, all of those things, the same movies you just mentioned. I was watching all of those things as a young kid, and then when I told my parents I wanted to be in the military, they're like, why would you want to do that? It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? It's kind of funny, right? Like they had absolutely no idea what I was being influenced by or how much it was influencing me like that as well. And you know what? I'm exactly the same as my parents. I have absolutely no idea what's influencing my daughter or what influenced my sons, because they're all looking at their phones and on social media. You just don't see any of it. I guess for my parents it was a bit easier because they could see Rob sitting in the lounge room watching a war movie on television again. It was one of those things.
Well, there are little clues out there, cultural clues that people can look for. Like if your kid is watching old war movies, if he's running around the neighborhood, when I was a kid, we would, as soon as I could walk, we were out the door, man, and we were playing in the neighborhood. We're going up and down the alleys with our friends, getting on our bikes, driving. Our parents didn't know where the hell we were. They would just say, okay, dinner's at 6, that's it. Be back by 6. That was it. And then you're out. These days, kids can't do that. You would be reported for child abuse if you let your kids,
Once again, so very, very similar like experience for me growing up. At the end of my street where I grew up, there's a big bushland, and we used to hang out there all the time and throw rocks at each other and, do all sorts of all sorts of mischief in there as well. But then across the way on the other side of that scrub, there was a major road, and then on the other side of it there was a place called Lake Gillawana, and all of these used to go over there and hang out there as well. And same thing, we come home when the street lights come on, and if the street lights are on, my old man would stand outside and he'd whistle like that, get home everybody, and but Dad, better go home, sort of thing. So and we lived here in Cronulla, I remember, because we lived on the north side, on the northern beaches, but we came back to Cronulla, and I remember saying to Susie at the time, this is a really great place for kids to grow up because they can do what we did when we were kids, because it's super safe. There's beaches to play around, there's bushland, there's like the river on the other side, there's heaps of places to do all of those things. But do you think the kids did any of it? No.
What a shame.
They did some of it. But when my son's coming over, when they're teenagers, they come over 14, 13, 14, 15, that sort of age bracket, they come around, they're kind of like, they're not really kind of going out. But I would drag their sorry asses out and make them go through all of that, So I did grow up outside, but just not by choice, I suppose, is the way you would describe that.
Yeah. So, and I think that's where you and I probably get our sense of freedom. It's kind of ingrained in us. We like being able to do what the hell we want to do. That is, I think humans by nature, they want to be free, and right now with the powers to be, with the things that are going on in the world, there is an active push to take all that away from us, to constrict the things that we can do. And we have to push back, So I don't know how we got onto that topic, but
that's a good segue. Let's segue into what's on to today's show. There's a lot happening. It feels like I've been away from the news and mainstream media for months, but it's only been a couple of days over the weekend. On today's show, folks, we're going to be talking about the First Republic Bank, who's actually completely failed now. There's going to be a bit of a discussion about Russians trying to engage American aircraft in Syria. You may not have heard about that. That's kind of some breaking news. But not really breaking news. It's from a couple of months ago, but it's only sort of coming out now. Ed's got some great information about investing because he was working on Wall Street for a very long time, and he's going to talk about the first rule of investing and of trading. And we're going to close out the show with a health-related thing that I know that Ed will have a little bit of fun with because he's all excited about eating bugs and, getting insect-based protein. But there's been a study that's come out that says that the vegan zealots need to go away, because plant-based diets are really bad for you. And I think that's kind of fun. It'll be a nice way to round out the show and have a little bit of fun. Folks, if this is your first time here at The Unspoken Truth, Ed and I cover news from mainstream media that you probably haven't heard. We've got some great resources. We go away and dig out all of these resources, and we'll show you the story behind the story. And we are not mouthpieces of the deep state. We have our own opinions, and we don't get drawn into propaganda. I find myself being drawn into the propaganda all the time, going, yeah, that's how it should be. That's how it should be. But then if I stand back objectively from it and I go, hang on a sec, what is the unspoken truth here? What are these people actually trying to say to us? And why do they want us to believe that? And who stands to benefit from that information? That's the type of analysis that we do on the unspoken truth. So if you're here for the first time, welcome. It's great to have you here. And we'd love to get your subscription. So just scroll down if you're watching on YouTube and hit that subscribe button there. So that way you never miss an episode. And if you're on the go, you can always catch us on Spotify. And don't forget to follow along on Twitter, Telegram, and Rumble as well. Well, Ed, why don't you take it away, mate? Because there's a pretty big story about First Republic Bank. It's pretty scary stuff, mate. So I'm going to hand over to you and pull myself out of the stream. So.
Thank you, Robert. And don't go away because my report's not going to take too long. I want to get right into the commentary. All right. So this report, it's not new news really. It's just an add-on news. We've been talking about. We started talking about First Republic Bank last week, and we were predicting exactly what was going to happen today. And so here's the headline. Now this is right off the presses. This is a brand new development. You'll see that the dates on these reports are all May 1st, and today is May 1st. This is all brand new news. All right, so let's take a look at the first headline. All right, J.P. Morgan Chase, National Association, Columbus, Ohio, assumes all the deposits of First Republic Bank out of San Francisco, California. Notice that, boy, a lot of these banks, all these banks so far are coming out of San Francisco. Maybe there's a little clue we should be taking from that. And here's a little bit of information. So First Republic assets include $173 billion in loans, $30 billion in securities, and $92 billion in deposits. So this is a big deal. This is the second largest bank failure in U.S. history, the first one being Washington Mutual back in the 2008 crisis. So this is a very big deal and a little bit scandalous. Let's take a look at this guy here. Okay, so the FDIC and J.P. Morgan Chase, the bank, National Association, are also entering into a loss share transaction on single-family residential commercial loans it purchased from the former First Republic Bank. Here is the important one. The FDIC, as receiver, and J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, National Association, will share in the losses and potential recoveries on the loans that they recovered. All right. So what a sweet deal. Now, there were other offers from other banks for First Republic Bank. J.P. Morgan literally put in their bid around 1 o'clock this morning, okay? And this announcement came out just a few hours before the market opened up. So let's think about this for a second. And I'm sure there's no corruption involved here. Absolutely no corruption. And I'm sure the regulators looked through this bid very carefully, and they considered all the other bids and decided this was the best one. All right, so we'll get into that in a second with Rob, because I really want to dig into that scandal. All right, now let's kind of remind ourselves. Most people don't know this, but in 1994, there was a law passed where no single bank was allowed to have more than 10% of the total deposit base in the United States. Well, JP Morgan coming into today already had, guess what, 10% of the nation's. So they legally should not be allowed to acquire these deposits, this bank. They've maxed out, according to law, the amount of money that they are allowed to have in the bank. Now, of course, that is meant to avoid monopolies, right? That's the whole idea. That's the whole intent behind this law. But I guess the laws don't matter anymore. I mean, the regulators either know they don't know what the law is, or who cares? They probably don't expect people like me to know this stuff and to hold them to it. And so I want to talk a little bit about, Rob, you want to come back in here? Okay, so, this whole thing stinks to high heaven. Now, let's all keep in mind that this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is part of a plan to whittle our financial industry down to the top 5 or 6 banks. Now, we saw the favorable status that SVB Bank got, And now we're getting another bailout, a sweetheart deal with this First Republic Bank. And okay, JP Morgan, other banks have put in bids, but they went with JP Morgan. In addition to JP Morgan acquiring another $103 billion worth of deposits, get this, Rob, the Federal Reserve is giving them $13 billion just to do the deal. The FDIC is giving them $13 billion. It's not enough that they're giving them the bank, but they're throwing in another $13 billion. And add to this, that as you saw in that one press release, the FDIC is going to share in the potential losses of the bad debts that they got on the books, right? So they just reduced the risk to almost nothing for JP Morgan. But on the upside, JP Morgan gets all the profits on any, because all those loans that they took on, the biggest problem with these loans out there is the current state of interest rates in the country. Well, if JP Morgan, toughs it out for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, their interest rates could somewhere along the way pull back in there. There could be a pivot. And those and those assets that they just took over cheap, they could increase in value enormously. So they have virtually no downside because they share the risk with the FDIC, but they get all the upside. So if things work out for JP Morgan with these loans, the FDIC doesn't get any of the profits. They only share. I mean, what a deal. Would you take that deal? I mean, what a sweet deal. No risk, and you get all the upside potential. So circling back to the big point on this, and then another quick point is, there is a concerted effort right now to reduce our banking system down to a small number of banks. And in the crosshairs are the smaller to medium-sized banks. So any of you out there who are in the smaller, medium-sized banks, you should think really hard about having your assets in those banks, because when they fail, they are almost certainly not going to get the sweetheart deal that JP Morgan got, because they want to take care of the large banks, the big banks, the JP Morgans of the world, not the small ones. So reduce your exposure to your bank, put some of the money into gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. And one final point I want to throw in here, because it is relevant and it really kind of grinds my gears, is there is a renewed push in Congress to censor people like you and me, Rob, who are talking about these kind of events on social media. And they're blaming what happened at SVB Bank and now with First Republic Bank on us, on social media, saying, hey, there wouldn't have been runs on these banks if these social media platforms were not scaring the hell out of people. So in order to avoid that, we want to put muzzles on people out there who are telling the truth. So
you know where that comes from? GameStop. Yeah. That's where that comes from. So the people on Reddit came together and said, you know what, bad luck. This is what we're going to do. And that's what it comes down to, Ed. It comes to the communist ideology, the Chinese Communist Party, and I can tie it all back to that pretty easily. And hey, where's Rob going with this? Isn't that a bit of a leap? Why is that communism? Well, the reality is the Chinese Communist Party are not really that scared of us as their adversaries in the West, because they feel like that they can contain us. And if they couldn't contain us, they've got nuclear weapons to contain us with. But what they can't do is they can't contain their population. So the Chinese Communist Party and all communists, all socialists, fear insurrection from the inside out, because they don't have enough forces. There's not enough military. There's not enough police to actually stop an uprising to take a government down. And they tried to do that in 1989 in Tiananmen Square, but it wasn't working. And they were so scared of 2,000 people inside of Tiananmen Square, or there was 10,000 people in there, wasn't there? They killed like 2,000 of them, that they just brought out the tanks and the machine guns and mowed them all down. And it's like, well, there's no uprisings here. We are firmly in charge. That's what's going on. And to your point of the government not wanting people in social media to be talking about these banking failures, that kind of makes sense, because we saw it happen really badly with GameStop. And if that happens in the banking sector, that can cause all sorts of chaos and problems there as well.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but a little bit of a difference there, and it's an important one. We do have laws on the book. They're called front-running laws. So, I mean, if you want to, if you want to short a stock that had a huge, run up, first you would take your position, and then you'd flood news reports about how bad whatever it is to drive it down. Okay, that's illegal. And that's called
insider trading, right?
That's right. It's manipulation, right? And that is fraudulent. And there are laws against that. That's a very specific, law. Now, you and I, we have no financial. We don't benefit from the news reports that we make. We put out the truth on things. But for people who are trying to profit from spreading false information about that, because look, a rumor and something like a GameStop, if you have a group of people on the Reddit platform and they're all of like mind, they're looking for a fast trade, they're looking for fast money, right? And the leader, he's sitting, he's got his headlines all lined up, ready to go, and push it, and they all see it at the same time, and they all rush in, and so forth. Okay, that's illegal. Okay, so, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about putting out public information. You and I don't have inside information with anything. We're reporting actual news, actual headline news. But then we are given the unspoken truth about, well, what is this headline? What does it really mean? We dig a little deeper. We look behind the headline a little bit. That's different.
Yeah, absolutely. If I Google quickly how many small banks in the US, so there's 4,000 small banks in the United States, right? So according to Google, just like in a 2-second search like that. So I just want to give you some perspective, because what you were saying is like so unbelievably true. What the government is trying to do, because this contagion is going to spread. There's no doubt about it. We've had 2 that have gone. Now we've got a 3rd one, Gonski's. And has it been rescued by the FDIC? Yeah, kind of, sort of. It's a bit of a hybrid deal. It's quite different to what we probably would have anticipated a deal like this would have looked like. Probably just would have gone away. Everybody lost and bad luck. But these businesses are, once again, it's like wars. Wars are perpetuated by the Federal Reserve. These banking crises are perpetuated by the Federal Reserve, because the only way that they get that money is for the money to be printed and given in advance. And you quite correctly point out that that's like a sweetheart deal. Of course, they're going to take it. Of course, they're going to do everything they can to get a deal like that. But you showed last week there was a congressman that was asking Janet Yellen, so are you going to secure all of the regional banks in my constituents? And she was like, well, maybe if there's a supermajority and all of that corporate banking doublespeak BS that she was talking. But the reality is, if there's 4,000 small banks in the United States and all of them go away, and it comes to a handful of banks, maybe a dozen other banks that own everything, what you're going to have is something that looks like Australia. So in Australia, there's 4 big banks. Yeah. And when I Google, as you were talking now, I was Googling quickly because I couldn't think of how many small banks there are in Australia, but there's only 50. So if you went from 4,000 to 50, and your big banks, because you're bigger than Australia, of course, was about a dozen or maybe 20 or so really big banks, then you would have a system that seems like it would be more manageable and more controllable by the government and the Federal Reserve, right? So it's not something that's a free-for-all like it is now, and this is all happening. And when you look back to the history of the Federal Reserve and the reason that it was set up, the reason they set that up is because in the lead up to that, in the late 1800s, there was about 5 or 6 or 10 banks that collapsed. And that was because of the way the system worked, because people would put their money in the bank, they would write a check, somebody else would write that check, give it to you, you'd go up the street and put it in a bank that was not mine, and then they'd have to adjust the balance sheets on the books like that. And eventually these banks blew up and went away because they were overstretched and the system and the infrastructure didn't work the way that it was designed to work. And the Federal Reserve was born out of that chaos, and it was designed to solve those problems. And for quite some time, it actually worked and it evened out the market. I think it wasn't until the late 1940s that it actually started to actually be perpetuating problems and causing more problems. And then it snowballed into what we've seen today. What is it? The last 4 or 5 years of our existence, they've printed more money. Like all the money that's in existence, like what is it, like 80% of it or 85% of it?
40% of all.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
More than half of it, or half of it has been produced in the last 3 years of all the money that's in existence like that. And, to your point of First Republic going away and then being absorbed by JP Morgan, but then them circumventing the laws of the land to actually do it. It's another little indicator. And here's the unspoken truth, folks. This is another way they're just chipping away at your freedom. It might not affect you. You might not even bank with them. I don't bank with them. I'm in another country, for heaven's sake. Why do I care? But what I care about is the precedent that's being set, because they've circumvented the law somehow, and the laws exist to protect normal people like you and me, but it's rules for thee and rules for me. They do whatever they want, and they're chipping away at our freedoms systematically. And eventually, to your point, Ed, it becomes something really sinister in the form of a central bank digital currency. And maybe the CBDCs don't really come about until there's a complete rationalization of your system there in the United States. Meaning if there's 4,000 banks, that has to come down to like 50, like here in Australia or whatever it might be like that. Well, certainly an interesting time, that's for sure.
Well, the biggest cause that's been attributed to all these problems with the banks are the commercial loans out there. Commercial loans are the big issue right now. And trust me, First Republic Bank and it's not the only bank with these kind of loans on their books. This is a systemic issue.
That's until the contagion, isn't it? When you say that word contagion, that's what that is. Other banks have got the same problems. And
that's right.
Behaving in the same ways.
And they all own each other's debts on their books. This is a very incestuous industry, right? They're all interconnected. That's why you have these domino effects. And if if a bank, especially if it's a large bank, like First Republic Bank, the second largest bank in U.S. history to go under, when you have banks like that with that kind of an issue, they're not the only ones. All of your smaller banks, every other banks who are probably more vulnerable than a First Republic Bank also have the same issue. Now, these banks, they report their balance sheets, they report all the financials quarterly, right? That's why these big blowups tend to happen at the end of a quarter, because that's when they've got to show people, they got to lift their skirts and show people what's really going on. And that's when things tend to blow up. I mean, that's what happened, right? So I think come this fall, I think right around August, September there, that's where I predict the next really big event is going to happen in a very big way. And I think between now and then, you're going to start seeing, look, listen, I hate to say it, but if you're going to fail, it's better if you fail early. So all these, right? The earlier you fail, the better off you are.
I think you might be right. That's the entrepreneur adage, right? Fail forward and fail fast, so you can get on to the next thing and figure out what's going on there. But you don't want to be doing that with other people's money, that's for sure. Certainly an interesting time. And I said to you the other day, I'm going to keep using that same YouTube thumbnail, and every time I'm going to add another bank to it, I'm going to cross that out and keep crossing those banks out. So we'll see what's happening next, if it's Credit Suisse or somebody else like that. Have you got a prediction, or just be another small bank like First Republic?
Well, First Republic wasn't small. It's the second largest bank, in the country. The one.
Oh, is it? I wasn't aware that it was like
the second largest. The second largest bank failure in its history. Well, if I had to guess, I'd say Wells Fargo. But there's so many that's teetering. I don't know. We'll usually find out on Friday evenings after the bell closes. So every Friday night, we'll see.
Well, I was going to say, because I sent you a message yesterday, and I think it was my nighttime. So you're watching the back of your eyelids in the middle of the morning for you. And I'm like, they collapsed, they went away. And it's like on a Sunday or a first thing on a Monday morning, your time, like that. So markets are closed, no reaction, none of that. It's all completely manipulated, man.
Yeah, but the overall message I want to get across to people during the segment is listen, guys, big things are happening in the financial industry. You have to be aware of this. And you cannot just blindly have faith that your bank is okay, that your bank is an exception. Your bank is not an exception. Okay, because they're all interconnected. Unfortunately, they're all tied together. So, and the government's not here to help you. So you have to help yourself. You have to look out for yourself, right, Rob?
You're making it sound like such a downer, man. I thought the politicians were there for us. We voted them in, didn't we? Thought they were there for us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you keep talking about all these corrupt politicians in Australia, and I'm thinking, but that must be unique to Australia because our politicians are not like that.
All right, let's shift gears for a sec here, and I'm gonna boot you out of my stream here and go and do my little report. What I've got going on. So it's been some interesting times in the last couple of months, particularly over in Syria, and there's been a report that's come out in the last couple of days. Russian pilots have attempted to dogfight US jets over Syria. How's that going for you? I bet you they would last about 20 seconds in the scheme of things, making several recent incidents of aggressive behavior. While not going so far as attempting to shoot down American jets, because they can't, they may be trying to provoke the US into an international incident. According to Colonel Joe Bacino of US Central Command, the hostile behavior began in March and has raised concerns among US military officials about potential miscalculations and escalation. Previous incidents include Russian jets violating coalition airspace and coming dangerously close to US aircraft. American pilots have been advised not to engage with the Russians, and US officials have reached out to their Russian counterparts regarding these incidents, but they haven't received satisfactory responses. Get this. Since March, Russian jets have violated deconfliction protocols over 85 times. And it's some serious stuff that's going on there. But I think it's a little bit funny. And part of the reason that I raised it is because the Russian Airforce has been found wanting in Ukraine. They just haven't performed the way that we thought that they would. They've got large numbers of aircraft. They seem to have really good equipment, but the reality is on the battlefield, they've failed to maintain or even gain air superiority against otherwise some sort of strange adversary, which is a Frankenstein of a bunch of different things. They just haven't been able to gain the upper hand. And in order to actually win a conflict and actually take the ground, you need to own the air. And that's the reason that the coalition and us here in the West are so successful on the battlefield in the modern battle space, is because we can own the air pretty quickly. And once you own the air, you're able to move up because you're able to cover the troops on the ground and be able to do that. So far, the Russian Air Force hasn't been able to do that. And their experience extends only to Syria, which is an unopposed location. And we saw the accident, which is what I call it. It wasn't even an incident, where the Russian fighter jet crashed into the American Reaper drone a couple of weeks ago. And when you look at the footage of all of that, it doesn't actually look deliberate to me. I think they were deliberately flying around it, trying to cause all sorts of problems. But when the pilot actually collected the drone, what you see is it looks like he's just closing up on the thing too quickly. And I've done not a lot of formation flying. I've done a fair bit of formation flying. And the number one rule when you're formation flying is, what do you think it might be, Ed?
Don't hit the guy next to you. I don't know.
Yeah, and how do you reckon you don't do that?
You keep an eye on your wingtip. I don't know.
That's it.
Okay.
You're looking out the window, right?
Okay, great.
It's no more complicated than that, man. Flying airplanes is actually pretty easy. And when you look at the way that the Russian Su-27 collected that drone, the bottom of the jet actually crashed into it. So he completely lost sight of the drone, which says to me he was closing up on the actual drone itself, but lost control, lost sight of what was actually happening. And when I looked at that, I thought, that actually looked like the jet got away from him and the aircraft got ahead of him. And when I sort of looked at all that, I started reading, and I was just doing some analysis of all of that and thinking, what is the mainstream media? What's the deep state trying to tell me here? What narrative are they drawing me into? And I just kind of ignored all of that while I was looking. And then I came across an article that was saying that Russian fighter pilots only get about 40 to 50 hours worth of flight training a year. American and coalition fighter pilots get anywhere from 40 to 50 hours per month. So flying is and I just know from being an aviator myself, flying is a skill that decays. And it's not so much the hands and feet skills. Like, it's pretty easy to take off and land an airplane and to operate the controls and to navigate and to do all of those things. But what is really quite difficult to do is to stay ahead of the airplane in your brain. So, and especially the bigger airplanes get, the more complicated they get, the further ahead of the aircraft you must be. And there's a saying in aviation that, the airplane will crash and you'll walk up behind it 10 minutes later, scratching your head going, what happened? Because it got so far ahead of you and the aircraft got so far in front of you that you just couldn't catch up mentally to what it was supposed to be doing. And that's part of the reason that airliners don't just have one pilot, right? You need several people inside of a flight deck to actually be able to manage those things. Even with all of that automation, you still need people there to actually manage it. And so when you look at single seat fighter operations like the Russians and Americans in Syria, those Russians, they will, I promise you, man, they will last about 20 seconds in a knife fight in a phone booth with American fighter pilots. And I was just scrolling through my YouTube randomly yesterday, creating some videos, and I was watching this F-16 demo pilot from just a couple of days ago in some air show somewhere in the States. And I was just watching the way they took off and the different camera angles. And it was like a montage of all of these air show clips that were put together. And these fighter pilots, is a woman of all things, you know, not that that should make any difference, but it just kind of shows you, are they female Russian fighter pilots in the American Air Force at the standard of a demo pilot that could pull off those things like that woman did at an American air show? And the answer is no. Most men couldn't do that. And this is not a gender thing that I'm saying, but what I'm saying is the quality of training that we have with our Air Force just shows and proves that the Russian Air Force have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And if they're in Syria provoking American fighter jets, just be careful, man, because if you fly too close to the sun, you're going to get burnt, right? And I find it just alarming that there's 85 incidents. So think about how many patrols will go on per day and what's happening there. There's probably, you know, half a dozen patrols that happen on a daily basis. So this is going on a couple of times a day where the Russians are intercepting American jets and they're closing up on them and causing all sorts of problems. And it must be the hardest thing in the world for these American fighter pilots to restrain themselves and not give these guys a bloody nose and teach them a lesson.
Well, that's just it, right? And I mean, you always have the bully in the neighborhood who can reign and get away and create all sorts of chaos and create fear. But until the next big guy comes along in the neighborhood and shows them who's who. And you know, the Russian pilots right now, they're more advanced, I'm sure, than the Ukrainian pilots. So they are the big dogs at the moment. But yeah, like you said, our guys are probably just itching to get in there and show them what's what. But that's a political. Look, that's a whole new ball game, though. I mean, Zelensky's been asking for these advanced fighter jets and advanced weapon systems since the beginning. And you and I had talked before. All right, so what if we did give him the latest batch of fighter jets? Who's going to fly the things? It takes a long time to get trained on the I don't know, on the, what's the latest one? The F-16. What's the newest one? F-35.
Yeah, well, that's what they're asking for. You know, F-16s, because they're pretty prolific and, you know, they're available to be supported.
But how complicated is the F-35?
Less complicated than the F-16. You know, the fifth gen aircraft is completely different to fourth gen, but that's the thing. They're never going to get an F-35. And if this escalates into a conflict where NATO actually become part of it, NATO will just destroy the Russians in the first couple of hours of the war. And not a lot of people realize that. That is the reality. That's the unspoken truth that no one speaks about. Yeah. And that's because no news anchor on CNN is willing to come out and make that prediction or to say those things. A couple of squadrons of F-35s and F-22s will go in there and completely destroy the Russian Air Force in the first few hours of the war. And then you send the close air support aircraft in shortly after. They'll just completely and totally decimate the Russians. This thing could be over literally in a matter of like a week.
Well,
and it's really strange because
I mean, the current status of the war could be over, but you know, we talk about all the unintended consequences. Well, because that's going to be a huge escalation, right? If we were to send, if NATO were to send in our jets and demolish the Russian Air Force, okay, now we're in a whole different ballgame. Now we got, certain people dusting off some nuclear, buttons, and that's the last thing you want. So you got to think through, you got to look beyond the next step, right? When you go into warfare, I assume you have to look, well, if we do this, this is what could happen from that. I assume there has to be some gaming on that, right? There's got to be some war gaming.
Well, there's precedent, yeah. So there's a couple of precedent. The first precedent I'll share with you is the siege of Sarajevo. So in the 1990s, when the war was happening in Bosnia and Serbia, Sarajevo was under siege. So it's a city surrounded by mountains, like kind of in a like an amphitheater. The city is in the middle of it, and the mountains are around one half of it. And what they did is they put artillery pieces on top of these mountains, and they just shooting down into the city continuously for 2.5 years, something like that. Just horrendous, right? All day long, just raining artillery down, and it was the beginning of NATO's involvement in that conflict. They said enough is enough. There was a whole lot of footage that was coming out of Sarajevo when that was happening, and all these civilians being blown to pieces with artillery all day long, and they were enough's enough. And literally in one afternoon, they destroyed all the artillery pieces, and everything went away in one afternoon. So that had been going on for 2.5 years, but we knew exactly where all of their stuff is. We know the disposition of everything, and in one afternoon, the Air Force destroyed it all and stopped it all. But it went on for 2.5 years. And so that's what I'm saying is the precedent is there. So if I kind of shift over to Ukraine and Russia and NATO, the problem that we are facing, what you're saying is quite correctly, somebody is like going and blowing off the dust of that big red button on Putin's desk. Every exercise that we've ever done where we're the red force, meaning the Russian side, and the Russian side goes up against the American side, it always ends in a nuclear conflict. Yeah. Because the Russians cannot destroy NATO. They cannot beat 35 countries, 39 countries, whatever it is. It's just impossible to do. So the only place that it goes to is to escalate, to de-escalate the whole scenario. And they're fighting to win a nuclear war. We're never actually going to use nuclear weapons unless they do it first. Although they've changed the policy recently to say we can if we need to. If we don't, it used to be not a launch on warning. It used to be a launch on confirmation of a strike. But they're like, no, if they launch against us, we'll launch against them as well. So
I know that it's kind of common opinion that there are American boots on the ground there. It's just kind of a wink and a nod kind of a thing. Yeah, trust me, guys, there are. Of course there are. But officially, we don't have any boots on the ground, right? We don't have the. Am I right?
Well, here's a bit of unspoken truth for you.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I want.
Here's a bit of unspoken truth that no one in mainstream media will report about. And I pulled a couple of articles out, but it's quite difficult to actually get confirmation. That's why I never brought it up here. But I can summarize by saying it was a couple of weeks ago. It was probably about four weeks ago at the start of March. There was a large attack of Russian hypersonic missiles. So the Kinzhal missiles that the MiG-31s have. So not cruise missiles and not shitty Iranian drones, but the hypersonic Kinzhals. And they're designed to take out infrastructure, right? So the thing is going to fly straight at the ground, coming down from space at 12 or 13 times the speed of sound. It cannot be intercepted. And when it hits the ground, the kinetic energy is huge, right? It took out a NATO command and control bunker. And it's claimed, the Russians claimed that there was up to 300 commanders in there. And the day that happened, Zelensky came out and was giving a news conference, and the guy looked like, 300 of his best soldiers had been killed. That's what he looked like. You could just tell his disposition and what had actually happened, because there's no stopping those hypersonic weapon systems. So you're not hearing about that in mainstream media, but it's very hard for me to actually cross-reference all of that and find reputable sources that will say those things. Because you look at these websites and you go, oh man, is that just some Russian blogger? Is that propaganda? It's very hard to know what's going on. But if you read half a dozen articles and watch, 10 videos as well, you can kind of piece together the picture, and then you see Zelensky's body language and you go, man, something really bad definitely happened that day. That he's not the normal sort of Zelensky that you see. That was a real downer. So, are the Russians getting the upper hand with those types of things? Yeah, well, maybe. There was a big strike yesterday as well in a place in central Ukraine that hasn't been struck with cruise missiles and drones and all of that. And it said that an ammunition dump and a storage depot had been completely destroyed in anticipation of the counterstrike that was about to happen. But once again, not reported in mainstream media. The only place that you see that is from people with their mobile phones in Telegram posting those things in those channels as well. So, the unspoken truth is that this war is not going the way that we want it to. And it's actually going to end pretty badly. This is kind of the last throw of the dice.
Listen, personally, I think, and we talked about this last week, I think the worse it starts to look for Ukraine, the more likely it is we're going to see Xi and Zelensky and Putin showing up at some third country signing the peace deal. and the next day, Zelensky is going to be signing up for the BRICS coalition. So my guess is that right now Zelensky is saying, all right, I've got my plan B. If I get to that point, then I'll just join BRICS with China. So
there was a news report before there's a BRICS meeting coming up in South Africa, and they said to Putin, don't come. Yeah.
yes.
Don't come, because if you come, we're going to have to arrest you because we're
Yes.
signatories to the ICC.
Yeah.
So if you want to come via Zoom, but don't physically come here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he'll send a representative. And yeah.
Imagine the Pentagon heads exploding when Zelensky signed the deal with BRICS
exactly.
and with Xi Jinping for the Silk Road.
I'd pay for somebody. Listen, guy, if you're in that room, get your cell phone out, man. And take some video, because man, that would be so fun to just watch the expression on the face. Oh boy.
All right, let's shift gears to your second piece for today. You're going to be talking about the first rule of trading and investing. Is it like Fight Club? Don't talk about trading and investing?
Well, I talk about it all the time, so I break that rule all the time. Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Right,
okay, so for those of you who don't know, I've got a Wall Street background. I spent almost 30 years on Wall Street, working as a stockbroker, a trader, and as a trading instructor. So I do know a little bit about this topic, and I thought it'd be kind of useful in this day and age to discuss. I'm going to tell you the first rule of trading that I would give my trading students who came in to take my class and they want to learn how to be a trader. And I have lots of what I call edisms, or what became known as edisms in my class. And over the years, I kind of focused in on, well, what's more, what's most important to know. What's the first message to give people? And I think this would be a useful message to every one of you out there, whether you're trading or whether you're an investor. But this is the message I would give to traders on the first day. So remember, when you are trading a stock or a bond or commodity, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're trading. The underlying product doesn't matter. In every case, you're trading people. All right. Financial markets are made up of human beings. Now, human beings are emotional creatures. And that's why the markets will never be a rational place. So you have to learn to think differently when you're a trader. Fundamentals don't matter. There's only one thing in the world that moves the price of a stock, and that's buying pressure, period. If there are more buyers than sellers, it'll go up. More sellers than buyers, it'll go down. That's it. That's the only thing that affects the price of anything, including real estate for that matter, right? So our job is to learn how to read the street from an emotional point of view. So you want to learn how to look at charts, learn how to look at technicals. So for those of you who are thinking about trading, you're going to go to Barnes and Noble and load up on a bunch of books about PE ratios. I'll save you a lot of money right now. Don't bother. Now look, if you're looking to be an analyst on Wall Street, knock yourself out. Then it's useful, I guess. But if you're looking to make money in the markets, fundamentals do not matter. Learn how to read the chart and learn some of the rules behind trading. Trading is a game in a very real way. And you need to learn what the tricks of the trade are. So for those of you out there who are thinking about trading, don't just do it cold. You should plan on getting educated before you do. And to sort of bolster my bona fides a little bit on this topic, I want to share with you something. All right, so give me, okay, share a screen. All right, let me put my glasses on. So. All right, so a few weeks ago, I was going through my list of all of my YouTube channels that I subscribe to, and I thought I'd clean them up a little bit. And I came across one that I didn't recognize before, and I looked up and said, what the heck is this? And this is my own channel. This was a YouTube channel that I created back in 2008. As a way to disseminate information, because I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to people about what I thought about the market and my favorite trade of the day and that kind of thing. And it was too time consuming. So I created what was called a YouTube channel. So now, and looking back, I am sure that now this is 2008. Okay, so what is that? 15 years ago? Oh, what is that? I am sure I must have been one of the very first people on YouTube, literally making market commentary. And so, for the fun of it, let's pick one here. See, new market spotlight stock of the week. This market we're doing specific. All right, let's look at this one. See what it. I don't know if you guys will hear the sound or not. Anyway, so I would do these videos, and if just for the fun of it. Okay, right now we're looking at a dating chart. Can you hear the volume on that? Industrial average. The market is still in a downtrend.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely hear the volume there. Not able to take out Ed, imagine if you had kept going with it, you would have been you're like the OG trading coach on YouTube, man. It's crazy. I wonder what the price of that stock is right now, or if it even still exists.
No, look, that channel, I never monetized it or anything, and it was, so back in 2008, 2009, I mean, look, they're very, I don't know how to. I'm impressed right now looking back that I figured out how to post things on YouTube back then, because this kind of thing is not my thing. But so I've got a history of this. And if you were, for the fun, if you want to go back and watch the videos, because back then I was giving specific actual trading ideas, and I was good. And you can it's very easy to check on whether or not they work or not, because just look at the performance of my recommendations. And the reason why I pointed that out to you, I mean, if you want to go back and look at them just for entertainment value, the channel is still there. I am going to take it down, I think, eventually, but just for the fun of it. But I guess the reason why I brought this up is because part of what we do here is try to enlighten people, and trading and investing is a central part of the way you can achieve your freedom. Is part of your financial health, right? Investing properly and trading properly. So once in a while, I may throw out a little bit of market commentary along the way about something that's going on in the market, and I'll give you my take about what's going on, because the things you hear on the tube are so wrong. These guys, sometimes I watch these guys, I just want to put my fist through the screen. They are so bad. But most people don't know the difference. They say, well, he should know. I mean, he's on TV, so he should know. So sometimes in here, I'm going to come on and say, that's not the truth. What he's saying to you is nonsense. And I'll tell you why he's telling you that nonsense too, by the way. Anyway, just for the fun of it, I wanted, as a starter, a little teaser, give you that first little trading lesson. And investing lesson is, remember, when you are trading or investing, you're not buying a stock, you're not buying a commodity, you are buying and selling people. So keep that in mind.
So I've got a question for you about all of that. Should I even, as a novice trader, if somebody's watching or listening to this, they're a novice, they've seen it, they've thought about it, they think, hey, I could do that. That looks relatively straightforward. I'd love to learn something like that. Should I even be learning that, or should I be handing it off to an automated algorithm to do it for me? Because trying to compete in that market with algorithms is like, I'm trying to compete with AI in my writing skills. It's just not possible to compete with ChatGPT. It's not. I just can't do it.
Nope, that's right. Actually, and remember, this is coming from a guy who loves trading, and I was a trading instructor. But my standard response now to people who ask me about the best way to learn about trading, I say, why bother? Just don't do it, because the technology has advanced to such a degree. The world of trading has evolved dramatically since I first started. When I first started, level 2 data wasn't even available to the public. Right? Now everyone has it. You pay like $100 for a platform. Everyone these days, they're spoiled, but it's kind of like giving a loaded gun to a kid. I mean, just because you can give it to them doesn't mean you should give it to them. Right? So you have this amazing technology, but you don't know what to do with it. If someone's wants to learn how to trade, I promise you, even if you're talented, even if you have a knack for it, you're going to have a long learning curve. It's going to take you minimum 2 years to get to a point where you're going to figure out what I call your trading skin. Like, I can teach someone how to trade academically in about 90 minutes. As it turns out, that's not the hard part. The hard part is learning out what it is that you like to do, because there are a lot of different ways to skin that particular trading cat. So you got to find out what your particular style of trading is. That takes a while. And during the process, it's going to be very stressful, very anxiety ridden, and it's going to be very expensive.
You're going to lose some money along the way. There's no doubt about that, because whenever you place a trade, it's a 50-50 chance you're going to be right.
Meanwhile, you have programs out there. My favorite program right now in this space is Daisy FX. And if you go to my YouTube channel, I got lots of videos on Daisy FX. But look, I'm not here to promote Daisy on our channel. But that is right now the cutting edge of the next form of trading evolution. It's artificial intelligence overlaid on top of algorithms. There's no way that the average person is going to beat the performance on Daisy FX, at least not consistently. You might get lucky in any short period of time. I won't mention the numbers that Daisy produces here because I'm not supposed to. There are rules against. Now, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, I can tell you what the numbers are. But it's pretty incredible. But yeah, for most people, you're better off farming out the trading to someone else, whether it's Daisy, whether it's Novatech, or whether it's some other. There are plenty of firms out there who will do it for you. And the deal is, it's money in, money out. Right? You give them the money, they trade it, they take their cut. Usually it's around 30%, and you take 70%, and that's it. It's very nice and clean. And that way you can get trading type returns without having to trade. Yeah. So this day and age, most people should not try to trade. Now,
some great services out there where you can piggyback off really experienced traders. You can see all their history as well. The software, there's programs, there's all sorts of things there as well. I'll put a couple of links down in the descriptions, folks, that you can check out. Make sure you head over to Ed's YouTube channel and have a look there as well, because he's got some great content over there about how to get your money out of the bank. Yeah, reduce your exposure, buy some gold and silver. It's a great little program over there as well, and also create some passive recurring income for yourself as well. So make sure you head on over to Ed's channel and check all of that out. And as always, the links will be right there in the show notes. Folks, I want to segue over to the last segment of the show here. And this is all about the vegan zealots that are out there. And I say that with kind of disdain in my voice, like, who would not want to eat beef? Who would not want to eat meat or fish or chicken or something like that? It's crazy. Anyway, plant-based diets have been debunked as bad for you. Let me just share a little bit of info that I came across, because I think it's kind of funny and it's a bit of a polarizing topic for some reason about what people are eating. I don't know why people that are vegans feel it necessary to tell the world that they're vegans. Like, who cares what you eat? It's kind of like your sexuality. Who cares? Do whatever feels right to you. But hundreds of scientists have criticized the push for plant-based diets, arguing that meat is essential. Hear that? It's essential for a well-balanced diet, and cautioning against vilifying meat eaters. That's what the vegan zealots seem to do. Experts behind 9 new research papers in Animal Frontiers have gathered nearly 1,000 signatures on a declaration emphasizing the value of red meat. Alison Stanton of the Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland argued that removing fresh meat and dairy from diets would harm human health. Now, I don't agree about that dairy stuff, particularly impacting women, children, and the elderly and low-income individuals. Adegabola Addison, director of University of Florida's Global Food Systems Institute, added that animal-sourced foods are superior to plant-sourced foods at simultaneously supplying several bioavailable micronutrients and high-quality macronutrients that are critical for growth and cognitive development. The Dublin Declaration calls for an end to promoting meat-free diets and has support from experts at top universities from around the world. Now, I don't know about you, Ed. I was a vegetarian for a little while, only because I just didn't want to eat meat anymore. I just felt terrible, and that lasted about 3 years. And then I felt like I was missing out. And then when I went back to eating meat, I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything, and I didn't feel like I felt any different or any better or any worse. I felt like when I didn't eat meat, I felt, here I haven't had a steak for a month, or I haven't eaten a sausage for 2 months, or a piece of chicken or anything like that. And I kind of didn't feel any different. I felt the same. But I found the longer it went on, the more it pulled me in my mind. Like, I haven't done it for this long. Now I better not do it at all. And it created this like devil and angel on my shoulders, constantly arguing with myself about what I put in my mouth. And one day I remember my kids were still pretty little, and I remember they were over for the weekend, and I took them home to their mum, and I stopped at the petrol station to put some fuel in my car. And right across the way was a fast food outlet called Red Rooster we have here in Sydney. And I was like, I could just smell the chicken. And I thought, you know what, like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I fighting with myself? And I was only really fighting with myself because I hadn't done it for such a long time. Now going back to it was going to be this taboo, evil, bad thing. But I didn't have any sort of zealotry around it. I was just doing it because I didn't do it and because I could. But then when I went and ate, I remember eating like a hot chicken roll and like breaking my virginity again for eating meat or some shit like that. And I like eat it. It was like, oh, it's the most delicious thing in the world. But I remembered exactly what that tasted like because I grew up eating that food. That type of fast food was in my neighborhood, right? And it was like, whatever. But you know what? This plant-based diet that has been perpetuated, is in anticipation of the WEF taking over and you having to eat crickets and bugs because there's no beef because it's causing greenhouse gases and cow farts and cow burps are causing all sorts of problems. I don't know. What a load of rubbish. What do you reckon, Ed?
Yeah, when I was a kid, they had the food pyramid, right? And of course, now that pyramid has been literally completely turned upside down.
It's been inverted, yeah.
Yeah, completely inverted. Remember when I was growing up, eggs were the big evil of our times. Whereas now it's like the centerpiece of every bodybuilder out there or anybody who wants to eat healthy. Eggs are like the superfood, right? So now and it seems like every 10 years there's some new cancer causing food. A common part of our diet, and then 10 years later, they say, "Oops, no!" And it turned out it really doesn't cause cancer. So the science seems to change. However, look, I'm a meat and potatoes guy all the way. I'm a meat. I already have my last dinner picked out when I go to prison. I know, I know what it's going to be
for exposing banks.
That's right. Yeah, but. Let's be honest, not all meat is created equally. Buying a grass-fed beef steak in the grocery store from the butcher is different from having a McDonald's hamburger. Okay?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Totally.
Right. So just like with everything, you got to be a smart consumer. You got to think smart. You and I were talking last week, and we're going to be doing a segment on this soon, I'm sure. Is that the worldwide sperm count and testosterone level has gone down by half over the past 30 years. And I think there is no way that our modern diet cannot be playing a role in that. When you look at the chemicals and the crap that's put into the modern dietary system, it can't help but be affecting our physiology. So there's so much to know. This is a very complicated topic, I'm sure, but people should do whatever they can to eat healthy. There are some simple things you can do, like instead of having a can of Coke, have a bottle of water instead, right? That's right. Hey, that's a big difference. That little difference is kind of a big one, isn't it? And you think about the sugar. Right.
I find this subject really kind of fun to talk about, and I kind of wanted to close out the show with something a little bit lighthearted, not related to war or the death of the economy today. For every argument or every side put forward, if you Google it, is the carnivore diet good for you? There'll be like 1,000 articles and videos saying why that will kill you in the next 3 hours. And then there'll be another 1,000 articles saying why you should do that. And if you eat another piece of broccoli in your life, you're going to die instantly as well. And it's like these people are so high strung about what they put in their mouth and their body. It's like you're forgetting the most important thing. The most, for me anyway, at least, is your emotions are the most sophisticated guidance system in the universe. And nothing is easier to follow than how you feel. If I feel like I want to eat a piece of steak or drink a can of Coke, then just freaking do it. You don't want to end up being 75 years old and die the healthiest person in the graveyard and, hadn't enjoyed a cigar or a glass of wine or, smoking a joint or something like that. You've got to live your life a little bit, and for some reason, people think I was in the gym the other day. I'll close it out with this. I was in the gym the other day, and up on the screen was this mainstream normal stuff that people see because I don't see TV. And it was this TV show called The Farmer Wants a Wife. And I was, it's a reality TV show, right? And all the people there are not perfect. Like, she was a little bit kind of chubby. He wasn't the best looking sort of dude. He was a bit rough around the edges. She seemed like she had a bit of a foul mouth. And I thought, no, they're just normal people. And we're so used to looking at people that look like models on Instagram that's not the real world. The people that I was watching on the TV in the gym, and The Farmer Wants a Wife, they were real people. They were living their lives. They were enjoying themselves. They were having a glass of wine. He was smoking a cigarette. He didn't give a shit, right? And all these things that were happening there. And I thought, you got to live your life. You can't worry about all of these studies coming out and saying that this is good or bad. Take it with a grain of salt is the way that I say.
Yeah, yeah. And let's face it, when you have a girlfriend, you tend to eat better, right? Just because you got someone to look good for at the end of the day. So I mean, I don't know where that came from, but
that's somewhere deep inside of you. That's your emotional guidance system pointing you towards it there.
Yeah.
All right, Ed. Another great show, mate. Thanks for your time and your efforts today. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube and make sure you ring the bell as well. That way you get a little notification every time we put out a new show. We put out a show every day. This is a news-related show, so you have news content related each day. Don't forget to follow along in Spotify. If you can't get to YouTube because you're driving or something like that, you can always tune in via Spotify. We're over on Twitter as well, and pop on over to Telegram because we put stuff over in Telegram that you can't see elsewhere, and going to get lots more active over there in the weeks and months ahead. And we've also got a Rumble channel if anything ever happens over here on YouTube. All of our content is available over there. So plenty of ways to stay connected to us. I really encourage you to come on over and comment, like, share, subscribe. If you've got some questions or any thoughts or any types of content that you want us to create, please reach out to Ed and I. We'd be happy to help you out there. And Ed, have you got any final closing remarks, mate?
Just please hit that like button.
That helps. It helps with the algo.
Yep.
All right, let's get out of here. See you tomorrow, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks, Rob. Bye, everyone.